Welcome to the Classical Commons podcast. I'm Rob Jackson, partner of Classical Commons, a digital platform that's connecting classical school communities across the country to talent and resources. By promoting excellence in classical schools, we're doing our part to create an ecosystem for liberal arts education. Today's guest, I am so pleased to introduce. He has been so active and supportive of a much overlooked aspect of the work that we do in classical education. Russ Gregg is founder and head of school of Hope Academy in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he served for almost 20 years, helping others, in fact, now with a network known as Spreading Hope to start urban classical schools throughout the U.S. I'm just delighted to have you with us today, Russ, because we want to talk about your project, your work, and maybe where it's headed.
Rob, it's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I want to get off right off the bat, get a little bit of backstory, if we might, in part because I think our listeners would really value understanding how you were drawn into this work. How did Hope Academy start?
Rob, 34 years ago, my wife and I moved in to the highest poverty neighborhood of Minnesota, a place called the Phillips neighborhood. And your listeners might be aware of it because it's only a couple blocks from where George Floyd was murdered. And we moved in there because we had this sense that as followers of Jesus, who were called to be the light of the world, that we should consider moving into an area that needed the light of the gospel the most. And this neighborhood, Phillips, is the one neighborhood that nobody wants to live in. It has the highest concentration of poverty of any neighborhood in the state. Only about 20% of us own our homes, and over half of us are living in poverty. And then it's got the crime and violence that go with those kinds of communities. And I remember telling my dad that we were going to buy a house there. And he said, "Russ, you're an idiot." He said, let me just tell you what's going to happen to the value of your number one investment. And not to mention raising my grandchildren in that kind of a community. But it was after that we moved in 91 that we came to realize that our neighborhood had an even bigger crisis than the poverty and the crime and violence, that it had an education crisis. And that over half of my neighbors of color were not going to graduate from high school. And the ones that did graduate would only be able to read on average at an 8th grade level. We learned about something that I had never heard of before called the school to prison pipeline.
Oh, geez.
Where somebody had figured out that if you're not reading by 3rd grade, the likelihood that you'll spend some time in the prison system is almost guaranteed. And that Minnesota led the whole country in the size of the achievement gap between white students and students of color. So it's the largest gap of any state in the whole country.
Wow.
And so most Minnesotans are ignorant of this thing because we assume that everybody in Minnesota at least gets a mediocre education.
Yeah.
But my neighbors were actually getting one of the worst educations in the whole country. Well, then my oldest son became school age, and we were looking for a great classical education for him, and that meant taking him 10 miles across town to the wealthiest neighborhood in our city. And while that solved our immediate need, it actually created a bigger problem for us because we kept asking the question, what does it mean to really love your neighbor as you love yourself? I mean, it's an extraordinary high bar, isn't it? That
is,
all of the
without
advantages,
question. Yep.
all the advantages and opportunities that we want for our own children, that we should want for Jabari and Jasmine and Jose. And I just couldn't get over that. I thought that would take millions and millions of dollars every year to give my neighbors that kind of education. Well, that went on for about 8 years. And there were many mornings, Rob, where as I'm driving my kids out to their school, I'm having to drive right past my neighbors who were trapped in some of the worst schools in the country. And I would pray for them. My prayer was something like this: Lord, would you tell somebody to do something about this problem?
Watch out what you pray for, Russ.
I can imagine that God must have chuckled and said, well, there's this one guy named Russ, and he lives right in the midst of it. But we all know that Russ has got two big problems. He's got a hard head, and what's even worse, he's got a hard heart. And now I'm not an educator by background or training.
Okay.
And so I really thought I did have a good excuse to not do something. But this continued on until finally in September of 99, at a Sunday morning church service, I was listening to a sermon about heaven. And the conclusion of the matter was that if we're going to inherit all things forever and ever and ever, what should you do with the 70 years that you've got on the planet? And the pastor suggested that we ought to consider venturing something for God that's a little bit crazy.
That's the phrasing. That's what he used. Yeah, that's what he said.
I almost jumped out of the pew, and I went home, and that led to the worst night of my life. As I presented all my reasons to God why I was not the person to do this. And finally, at the end, I felt as if God was saying, Russ, if you're not ready to get the ball rolling on this, I'm ready to move on and find somebody else who will. And so I went into my boss's office the next day and I quit my job. Wow. And my boss said, you're quitting to do what? I said, I'm quitting to start a classical Christ-centered school for my neighbors in the Phillips neighborhood. And he said, you're going to do that? I said, I know. He said, before you do something crazy, he said, why don't you just think with me for a minute? Do you have a building for your new school? I said, no, Steve, I don't. Do you have teachers and parents that are on board with you? I said, I haven't spoken to one. He said, you must at least have a promise of financial support from somebody. I said, Steve, I don't even have that. He said, are you quitting next May? I said, you already told me what I don't have. I'm quitting today. And sure enough, Rob, as I took my baby step of faith, then God started taking the big steps. And in the next 11 months, he provided all of those things. And on September 1st of 2000, we started Hope Academy, a classical Christian school with 3 teachers and 35 students.
It's just a phenomenal story, Russ. I mean, it really is. And I guess I like the contours of the story in part because it sounds so real, right? How many of us have had some of those dialogues with or exchanges with the divine, right? With the Almighty saying, well, I'm not, and we're in good company, right? Moses did something similar. Who am I? I can't even speak, right?
Yeah. Well, it turned out that the main qualification that God was looking for was just somebody that would trust him and believe his promises.
Yeah.
And that's been the amazing thing in that in 25 years, we've not lacked for a single dollar in this work. And we've been able to open the door to the most amazing classical Christian education to hundreds and hundreds of students that would otherwise never have the ability to have that kind of an education.
Well, as you well know, it's about those people, those teachers, right, that you somehow recruited in the course of 11 months. I actually, we'll talk about that at some point. But today, I think for our audience, we really want to explore with you how spreading hope, let's begin with the academy, right, that you launched, but also the network of academies, how they think about identifying and attracting teachers. Because I'm assuming that they're a special breed, that they have some characteristics that set them apart. Would you tell us a little bit about what you're looking for in a prospective teacher?
Rob, it's like we're looking for a needle in the haystack, really. Because number one, those teachers are taking on one of the most difficult missions that you could find anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And so they've got to have a vital, lively Christian faith,
okay,
for sure. And I think they've got to have a missional mindset that goes with that, a willingness to step out and to trust God in some new ways. So one of our core values at Hope Academy is radical dependence on God.
Yeah.
And almost within 6 weeks to 2 months of starting, a teacher will come into my office weeping, saying, Russ, I just can't do this job. This is just too hard. And I say, you know what? Now you're in the perfect place. Now you're exactly where God is able to use you in powerful, powerful ways, where you're in a place to practice radical dependence on Him.
Let me ask you, Russ, in terms of identifying that, or attempting to identify that before they arrive on campus, right? Before you extend an invitation, is there anything you're asking, any part of their story that you're listening for, that where you get a sense, like an intuition? Yeah, this person at least has some of what we're going to look for, and you're ready for that breaking point 2 months in, right? To bring them into your office.
Yeah, I think it's a willingness to do hard things, uncomfortable things for the sake of my neighbor. Sure. Lord, and you can see it's a reflection really on even from our founder's story that that we never really get away from that you're going to be asked to do some hard things.
And so that message is constantly going forth, right? I mean, everything they hear from the academy and from Spreading Hope is, this is going to be rough. It's going to be tough, but we're radically dependent on the Lord.
And we're doing it together. Is that, so you've got to be willing to collaborate. You've got to be willing to Lone Rangers don't last in this.
Right. They're going to flame out.
It's the hardest thing that you'll ever do that will bring you the greatest joy that you could ever imagine. and you do it together. And so you've got to be willing to embrace one another and be there for, be all in is sort of how we think about it.
Yep.
A second characteristic is an ability to build deep relationships with students and their families. And that we have a little phrase that's commonly heard, that nobody cares how much you know until they first know how much you care.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And so the very best teachers among us are great at connecting and building relationships. And some of that is actually, kind of cross-culturally, right? That it might be with people that are a different socioeconomic background or a different cultural or racial background.
Yep.
And so people that are emotionally intelligent.
I was going to say, you're looking for EQ, right? Emotional intelligence, really. Yep.
I am. And boy, does it make a difference, particularly when you've got students that have experienced a lot of trauma or woundedness, right? A person who deeply cares for them, it makes all the difference, all the difference in the world. A third area, and this is a real challenge even for me on a weekly basis, is not giving into what former President Bush called the soft bigotry of low expectations for youth of poverty. It's this idea that we have a suburban standard of education, and then we've got an urban standard of education. And I think low expectations are a cruel and unusual punishment. And so it's such a challenge, right, to believe that all of our students are created in the image of God, and that they have a kind of dignity inherent in them that allows them that means that they deserve the same kind of great education that maybe those that are living in suburban areas do. One story that gets at that idea is that right next to our school is a park called Peavy Park.
Okay.
And it's kind of the center of the drug and prostitution trade in our city. But almost on a monthly basis, a different church or ministry group will come into the park and serve food to neighborhood folks. And I bet you could guess rather quickly what's almost always on the menu. It's almost always hot dogs. Now, why is that? Right? It's for two reasons. Hot dogs are both cheap and convenient.
Yep, easy to prep. Yep.
Right? And again, so that.
I'm sorry. Apologies.
And so when we started Hope Academy, I had to ask the question, what kind of an education are we going to serve our neighbors with? And you know what? In all my years, I have never yet once found one parent who wanted a hot dog education for their child.
Mm.
Everybody wants steak, right?
Sure.
And so what Hope Academy is, and the Spreading Hope Network, is giving the best education there is to those children who need it the most.
Mm-hmm.
Give the best there is to those who need it the most. And it's a challenge that I find almost on a weekly basis. I have to check myself as to whether I'm giving in to that soft bigotry of low expectations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe the last thing that we're looking for is an ability to engage parents as authentic partners in the work. And so I think increasingly so, we're seeing parents marginalized. And whereas we think of parents as their child's first and most important teacher. And so we go to some extraordinary lengths to engage those parents. In October of every fall, we cancel classes for 3 days, and all of our teachers go out and do a home visit with all 20 families represented in their classroom.
No kidding.
And so from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m, we go out and visit with every one of those families for 3 days.
Can I interrupt you? Had you ever heard of anything like this before? Did you have a model to work with, or was this just like your gut told you, if we're going to engage with families, then we've got to dedicate time to it?
Yeah, it was more the second thing. Yeah. And when with new families, right, a lot of them are skeptical, and they wonder, is this like child protection services and that?
Oh no.
And then like our teachers will go out and maybe bake 20 batches of chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah.
And arrive on site with some cookies and maybe go out and buy some half price books and
sure.
Deliver some of those. And the thing is to build a genuine friendship with those families. And the families, have never had anybody, from a school situation reach out to them like that.
Sure.
And build a real relationship with them. Twice a year, we require all parents to come to school with their children on a Saturday for a half day.
No kidding.
So we call it Parent Involvement Day. They call it Saturday school, but
yeah, right.
But we spend the first hour and a half just meeting with the parents to help build their capacity to support their child's education. 2 weeks ago, we had our Parent Involvement Day for our lower school parents, where we were helping them to develop a daily reading program with their own children for 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And so we were equipping them and helping them to get on board with that. And then the second part of the day, they get to go into the classrooms and do work on a lesson with their children, and they get to see remarkable classical education with their own eyes. Sure. In a way that causes them to treasure it and hold on to it for the long term. So those are some of the things that we're looking for in a great teacher.
I tell you that last one really, really stands out, because classical education has staked out some territory that's been perhaps forgotten for some time. This phrase, this Latin phrase, in loco parentis, this that's idea right. That we were going to be an extension at the school. We're going to be an extension, right, of your parental oversight, your rightful authority over the child. And the fact that we are at Spreading Hope, you're in conversations with the family. You mentioned, the first time we go out, they're a little bit intimidated. Is this a CPS kind of visit or something, right? But yes. But in fact, when you come bearing gifts and then invite them into the school, you're going to win them over. You're showing them that you really do value them as the first educators of their children.
That's
first
exactly
teachers.
Right. That's exactly right, Rob. Yeah.
I'm so impressed by the fact that level of involvement, right? Your commitment to them, and of course their commitment to the school and to their participation in the school is balanced in a way that's really of greatest benefit to the child. It really does seem like a formula for success. And you've had great success.
Well, let me just follow with two other elements of that partnership is that we require every family to sign a parent covenant.
Okay.
of what they commit themselves to do, and we hold those parents accountable to those commitments. And so in this kind of an inner city neighborhood, only 15% of parents attend their child's parent-teacher conference. But at Hope Academy, it's 97% on the day of.
Yep.
And the other 3% get theirs done the following week. Now, why is that? Right? Well, what we've learned is the same thing that the cell phone companies learn, is that when you don't follow through on your commitment, they can turn off the service. And, what we've said is that if you don't reschedule your parent-teacher conference within a week, you have to keep your child at home until you do get it scheduled.
Yep.
Now, I've always get a new group of parents who don't believe we would ever follow through on that. And I've been on those phone calls and said, Miss Johnson, your son's waiting for you to pick him up in the front lobby.
Yeah.
And she'll say, well, is there a problem? Is he sick? Did he get in a fight? Is there something wrong? I said, Miss Johnson, there is a problem, and you're the problem. Is that you promised you would attend his parent-teacher conference. Until you get it scheduled, he needs to stay at home. Well, can I get that scheduled today, Mr. Gregg? Of course you can, right? And so, when we do a similar thing with students in terms of holding them accountable. So if you're on academic probation in our upper school and you miss an important assignment, we might ask you to, instead of going home on the bus at the end of the day, to stay after school and attend the academic support center and get that work done.
Yep.
And it cultivates the kind of habits of the heart that set you up for a lifetime of success, doesn't it?
Sure. That's exactly right. This is not really just about school. It's not just about what we're doing in the immediate moment. It's about their lives and what awaits them, right? With these
we truly believe that character is destiny.
Yeah.
Right. And so the classical model is about the formation of godly virtues in our students. That's right.
So now you're bringing together an all-star cast. You have to pull this off, right? I was reminded as I was thinking through this that John Senior, a famous sort of a well-known 20th century contributor to the classical movement, said that a school is its faculty, and so much depends upon the faculty that you've gathered. But you have to cultivate them. You have to continue to encourage and build them up. And I can detect, even from our conversation, a real esprit de corps that you have established. It's felt, right, in this faculty. How do you continue to develop them as professionals and as men and women committed to this mission?
Yeah, boy, isn't that you just nailed it right there. Is the key to every great school is we call it a faculty of friends.
Yeah, a faculty of friends. That's right.
And part of it is continuing to build up that spiritual health of our faculty. And so we begin every day of the week with a time of devotion, scripture reading, and prayer. And it really is a key part of our of building that kind of esprit de corps among the staff. But then I really do think that it's a matter of coaching.
Yep.
That may be, if I was going to add a fifth thing that I'm looking for in all of our staff is a coachable spirit,
teachable. Yeah, they're receptive, right?
You've got to be the kind of person that wants to grow, and we believe that a system of observation and feedback is one of the best ways that we can grow, and so that's probably the best thing we can do in terms of professional development.
Yeah,
is every staff member is a part of a pod that's overseen by an instructional coach.
Okay.
Who's regularly coming alongside them to improve their craft.
I would assume I'm gonna guess that you probably have raised up that cadre of instructional coaches from inside. Maybe some external folks have come in, but I'm guessing it's often homegrown, right?
They're all homegrown.
Yeah,
all homegrown. That's right. Yep.
Which is beautiful because it's organic, right? It's of that community. It's of that place, which I think is so powerful, so very powerful.
One beautiful thing that we've started to see, one of the things when you've been with a school for 25 years, like I have, is you start to see some things that most people don't get to see, is that now we're starting to grow our own future staff.
Yeah,
right. Our own graduates.
Right.
And so now we've got 6 or 7 of our own graduates who have returned and are teaching here at Hope. And that's probably one of the most thrilling and exciting things for me to see as a school founder.
Of course it is. And I think I told you in a previous conversation, the alum of your academy are just absolutely perfect, not only for returning home to their alma mater, but potentially if they relocate for life circumstances, they're going to be wonderful agents of change wherever they go to bring about this type of education, right? Wherever they land.
That's right. Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the network, right, that you've helped to establish. How did it come to pass that your project, which began in 2000, would eventually take on a larger footprint and you'd begin to multiply? Where did that come from?
Right. Well, news about Hope began to spread to others, and almost on a weekly basis, I was fielding calls from people that wanted to come and see, and visit, and learn. And so when about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, when we did our last capital campaign, I suggested, why don't we raise another $500,000 to start an adjunct organization called the Spreading Hope Network.
Yeah.
And so it's really, we feel like God has freely given this model to us. We should freely give it away to others. And we thought that we might be able to help 10 other cities around the country start a school, and we could do that over a 10-year period.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out that we've now seen 22 of those schools get started in the last 6 years.
Oh, that's incredible.
And so it's just completely blown our minds at how quickly that's happened. And so we've seen schools start in Houston and Shreveport and Orlando and in Oklahoma City and Tucson and different places, Cleveland, around the country. And so it's really surprised us to see what's happening. One of the things that we did is we developed a playbook. Yeah,
I was going to ask. Sure.
And so people aren't reinventing things, but are able to use what templates and things that we've started. So it usually begins. It's a 3-part model. So it's
walk us through that.
So it's a come and learn.
Yep.
Right, and then grow and develop secondly the ability to plant a school, and then third, go and plant. And so the come and learn part begins with a 2-day immersive plunge into Hope Academy. And so once a quarter, we host, the Spreading Hope Network hosts a 2-day plunge.
Okay.
And then they get immersed in getting to see everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
And then from that, then there are people that will respond to that and say, you know what? I want to step forward and found a school in our city.
Yeah.
And they apply to be one of the recognized founders that we will then walk with over a 3-year period to get them ready to plant a school, and walk with them through their T-1 year, their planting year, and then 1 year after that. When they're ready to go.
Now, are these all fresh startups, or are you ever working with schools where there's kind of a turnaround or there's a desire to move in the direction of the Hope model from an existing school?
Most all of them have been new startups.
Okay. Yep. Fresh seedlings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've heard about you through either the Society for Classical Learning or some other network activity. How did that come to
Commons or
that's right. We're going to put the word out. That's right.
So I do a fair amount of speaking at conferences and workshops and things like that.
Yep.
And then there have been one of the things that's been interesting to see is when we moved into this neighborhood 25 years ago, before starting the school, during those first 8 years, I could probably count all the authentic conversations with my neighbors about Jesus on one hand. In 8 years. But since starting the school, I often say I have that many conversations before lunch every day.
Kidding. No kidding.
And so I've had some people that were thinking about doing church planting, and they've heard me say, if I was given the choice of bringing a kind of the kingdom to a community, 9 times out of 10, I would now start a school first, and then the church. And so there have been a number of people that have been church planters who've heard me say that, and they've done an about face. And in Kenosha, Wisconsin, for instance, Justin Denny decided to plant a school, and he planted Kenosha Christian Academy.
No kidding.
There a couple of years ago, and seen some amazing things. Well, the story of that was published on the Gospel Coalition website. And so that drove, again, a group of people that said, boy, I'd like to explore that model.
Sure. We're going to make sure to place in our show notes a reference to that, the Gospel Coalition article, and anything else you want to send our way, because I have a feeling our listeners and viewers are going to be very interested in learning more. I want to conclude, if I can, Russ, with a question we asked to each of our visitors. We work with school leaders, with teachers and parents, and we're advancing classical by bringing these folks together to start looking more closely at the sort of the contours of this phenomena of the renewal of classical. So would you have any advice for someone listening who's interested in getting to know more about the Spreading Hope Network, how they might look at this, how they might get to know more? Where would they begin?
I think they would go to that spreadinghopenetwork.org website.
Okay.
And from there, you can quickly find a plunge and come and see. I think that's the number one thing is come and see. For a lot of people, the thought is that this is impossible. There's no way that something like this can happen, where a school is taking 90% of the costs, right, and taking those, and donors are carrying those 90% of those costs, and school families are carrying 10% of the costs. And they're saying that's just not possible. It's not sustainable, right? And so, people, until they come and see, and they go, "Oh my goodness, it really is." We've now bought 2 entire city blocks worth of property and manage over 500,000 square feet of facility. It's exploded to be that large of a thing that you just can't. And a lot of people, it encourages them to say, well, if God can do that in Minneapolis,
if he can do it,
he can do it. And if he can do it with a flunky like Russ, he can do it anywhere.
You've turned out pretty well, Russ. You really have. And I can't thank you enough for spending this time with us, because it's such a remarkable story. It absolutely bears repeating, and we intend to broadcast it as far and wide as we can. Thank you for spending this time with us. Really.
Rob, you're a great friend. Thank you.
You have a great one. Well, join us weekly on the Classical Commons podcast for updates on this renaissance, which includes the Spreading Hope Network. We're all about classical liberal arts education, and if you want to learn more, just come sign up at classicalcommons.org.